So first of all, welcome to the first video on my dedicated Nintendo playlist. This is something that's been a long time coming, and although the demand wasn't necessarily there for me to do it, with me naturally gravitating more toward Nintendo content of late, I figured this was a better option than filling up the number 8 topic branch of Patrick Sounds Off ad nauseum, which I'll be including in this playlist for continuity. To start things off, I felt like it would be a good idea to reintroduce myself through a sort of Nintendo lens for those who are just discovering this channel specifically in this context, so that you know what kind of content to expect from me over time. Coming from a poorer family, I wouldn't be introduced to Nintendo until 1988 when I moved to Logan, Utah, and found the NES to be a staple for some of the neighbor kids, which blew my mind at the time because I didn't really know about any gaming outside of arcades and the Atari 2600 until then. I pitched it to my family, and being gamers themselves, I would receive the NES for my 8th birthday alongside Marble Madness and Spy vs. Spy. A couple months later, Mickey Mousecapade, Super Mario Bros. 2, and an NES Advantage would join them, and I'd be off on my journey as I was starting to understand what gaming could actually become. Meanwhile, my mom and grandma made the decision that because we were never going to be the traveling, vacationing type of family going to Disneyland and Six Flags and SeaWorld and whatever else, they were going to go all in on video games as a relatively affordable replacement. People are surprised when I say I just didn't grow up on Disney, the aforementioned Mickey Mousecapade notwithstanding, but Nintendo really was my Disney as a kid, and it all started here. My mom went really hard on single-player, objective-based gaming, taking to games like The Legend of Zelda and Dragon Quest almost immediately, while my grandma had trouble wrapping her head around the idea of game saves and picking up where you leave off each session, and was far more interested in the waves of single-session co-op gaming that Konami was serving up, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2, Life Force, and Contra being among her absolute favorites. Tetris got all three of us pretty good, though, and it got really competitive, and Grandma in particular would latch onto puzzle games to the point where I'd often wake up in the morning to get ready for school, and she'd be playing Tetris, Yoshi, Dr. Mario, and so on. I'm going to gloss over 4th generation altogether here because while the Super NES represented some of my favorite gaming of that era, as a family we branched out to the Sega Genesis and TurboGrafx as well, and I associate those years more with specific genres, fighting games and JRPGs in particular, than with any individual platform. Nintendo hadn't fallen out of favor with me yet. My gaming world was just growing. The N64 was where things got more complicated with Nintendo, as I've touched on in previous videos on this channel, where other studios seemed to want to use 3D graphics to dress up existing franchises with a new look without really letting it affect the gameplay too much. Nintendo was on a mission to completely reinvent all of their IPs for the new possibilities, and I honestly found it really off-putting. I'm a gameplay mechanics guy. The way a game feels is that game's identity to me, and suddenly Nintendo was parading all of these familiar names in front of me that I didn't recognize once I actually picked up the controller. It's here that I reiterate that I'm from a working class family, and Nintendo had created a situation where I was being asked to drop $60, $70, even $80 or more dollars on individual titles that gave me no assurances that I could use past installments of their respective series as a baseline for my expectations. Of course, I spent my money on cheaper, safer releases on other platforms. Now, the estrangement wouldn't last too long, as the GameCube brought me back around with Wave Race, Blue Storm, and I got markedly more invested in it than the N64, but throughout the generations, something else would always just be my main console, whether it was the PS2 or the 360 or the PS4. Nintendo was off my shit list, but it seemed like things would never be the same as they were before F-Zero X and Ocarina of Time. Something else would change in more recent years, however. I've become quite disenchanted with PlayStation becoming a Western-centric company and both Sony's and Microsoft's lack of emphasis on exclusives that became abundantly clear in the opening years of 9th generation. Likewise, my confidence in purchasing games on optical media was shaken by growing knowledge of disc rot, and a long-standing lack of confidence in optical drives altogether when I realized that the solution to my problems was the Nintendo Switch that had mostly just been gathering dust as part of my gaming rig ever since it launched. It's not that I never played it, I just hadn't invested all that much into it, and it was time for that to change. Living in a studio apartment, but also having held on to all the games that I had accumulated over the years, I was wanting for both living space and money with which to restructure my gaming library. I divested of most of my pre-8th gen games, and part of this came with a massive expansion to my Switch library, which gives me absolutely no anxiety about disc rot or failing optical drives. The experience was astonishing. Not only was Nintendo not hurting for exclusives, it feels like they've finally returned to the approach and vibe of the 4th gen years, and I somehow spent most most of the system's lifespan sleeping on it even after it was home to my 2018 Game of the Year, Octopath Traveler. Rediscovering the Switch in recent months has been a great time, and while my PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X aren't going anywhere, it's clear that I have a new main console for the foreseeable future. Despite how I felt from the GameCube launch until very recently, things finally are the same again with Nintendo as they were when I was a kid, and having become a content creator in the intervening years, I feel like it's a good move to steer into that and make it another focus of my channel content. I also apparently picked a very interesting time to go down this path considering all the storylines surrounding the Switch at this very moment, like what's coming after Tears of the Kingdom, when will we see a generational transition, and so on. As for my tone, my derision for fanboys and other platform cheerleaders is already well documented on this channel, so don't expect that kind of tone from me. I'm also not a head-in-the-clouds idealist believing or even trying to promote the best and most exciting turns of events as genuine possibilities, but I can kind of cynically understand why some will do that for clicks. Rather, I think of myself as a grounded, sober industry analyst drawing from a lifetime of experience watching gaming history play out to inform how things are going to go as we move forward. If you're more interested in a realistic likelihood than hype, you're in the right place. Other than that, this is just going to be a way for me to share my experiences with you as I continue refamiliarizing myself with Nintendo as a focal point. It's been a very long time for me, and I look forward to that process playing out on this channel. If you're a fan of Patrick Sounds Off or any of my other playlists, don't worry, I'll keep supporting those as well. This is just one more facet of my channel to help grow it as this community moves forward. That's all for now. Please like, comment, share, and subscribe if you would, as it helps the channel out. Click the notification bell to know right away when new videos drop. I'm Patrick Mifflin, and I'll be back here soon.